I still remember the day I stepped foot on Wall Street, my heart racing with excitement and a dash of nervousness. The towering skyscrapers seemed to close in around me, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted in the flickering sunlight. The air was alive with the hum of conversation, the chatter of pedestrians, and the constant din of car horns. It was a world that pulsed with energy, where the pursuit of wealth and power was palpable. As I waded through the crowded sidewalks, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the grandeur of it all. The imposing stone facades, the sleek glass towers, and the historic buildings that seemed to whisper tales of the past. I felt small, insignificant, yet determined to leave my mark on this iconic landscape. But, as I soon discovered, my enthusiasm was met with a harsh reality. The world of high finance was not kind to those who didn't fit the mold. My obesity made me an outcast, a target for snickers and snide comments. Brokers and traders would glance at me with disdain, their eyes lingering on my waistline before dismissing me with a curled lip. I recall walking into a conference room, hoping to make a connection with a potential client, only to be met with a sea of faces that seemed to say, "You don't belong here." The whispers, the giggles, and the pointed fingers all took their toll. I began to doubt myself, wondering if I was delusional to think I could succeed in this cutthroat world. Despite the setbacks, I refused to give up. I pored over financial reports, studied market trends, and honed my skills until I could recite stock prices and trading strategies in my sleep. I attended seminars, workshops, and networking events, always on the lookout for that elusive break. But it seemed like no matter how hard I tried, the door to success remained firmly shut. The bias against obesity in the workplace was a hurdle I couldn't seem to clear. I was the underdog, the outsider, and it felt like the whole world was stacked against me. As I hit rock bottom, feeling like I'd never catch a break, a chance encounter was about to set me on a path that would change everything. Little did I know, my journey to becoming the billionaire who moves Wall Street was just beginning, and it would be a wild ride. I still remember the day that phone call came in. It was a typical Monday morning, and I was sitting at my small apartment, staring at the same four walls that seemed to be closing in on me. The rejection letters and emails had piled up, and I was starting to lose hope. But then my phone rang, breaking the silence. The voice on the other end was smooth and confident, with a hint of mystery. "Hello, I've heard a lot about your skills and knowledge in the stock market. I think you'd be a great fit for our firm." I was taken aback, wondering who this person was and how they had heard of me. But before I could ask any questions, they continued, "We're a small firm, but we're looking for someone with a fresh perspective and a willingness to take risks. Would you be interested in meeting with us?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure if this was just another dead end. But something about the caller's tone put me at ease. Maybe it was the sincerity, or maybe it was the hint of excitement. Whatever it was, I decided to take a chance. "Yes, I'd love to meet with you," I replied, trying to sound calmer than I felt. The meeting was set up for the next day, and I spent the rest of the day researching the firm and trying to prepare myself. I had no idea what to expect, but I was determined to make a good impression. The next day, I walked into the firm's office, and I was immediately struck by the contrast between this place and the sleek, high-rise buildings of the big investment banks. This was a small, unassuming office, with a handful of people typing away on their computers. But despite the humble surroundings, there was an energy in the air that I couldn't quite put my finger on. The mysterious caller turned out to be one of the firm's partners, a tall, imposing figure with a firm handshake and a warm smile. He introduced himself as John, and we sat down in a small conference room to talk. As we spoke, I realized that John was unlike anyone I had met in the industry before. He was passionate, driven, and willing to take risks, and he saw something in me that I had almost forgotten potential. Over the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly to prove myself to John and the rest of the team. I pored over financial reports, analyzed market trends, and made recommendations that seemed to pay off. And slowly but surely, I started to earn recognition. People began to take notice of me, to listen to my opinions and seek my advice. And with each small victory, my confidence grew. I started to see myself in a new light, as a capable and talented individual who had something to offer. It was a turning point, a moment when everything seemed to shift into place. And I knew that I would never go back to being the same person again. I was ready to take on the world, or at least the stock market. But little did I know this was just the beginning. As my star began to rise, I would face a new challenge, navigating the cutthroat world of Wall Street. and I would soon learn that success comes with a price, one that I was not yet prepared to pay. I still remember the day I walked into the office of the prestigious investment bank, my heart racing with anticipation. The sleek, modern architecture and the hum of activity on the trading floor seemed to reverberate through every cell of my body. I had done it. I had finally made it to the big leagues. As I made my way to my new workstation, I couldn't help but notice the curious glances from my new colleagues. They had all heard the rumors, of course, the whispers of a young, obese upstart who had somehow managed to make a name for himself in the cutthroat world of finance. I could sense their skepticism, their doubts about whether I truly belonged among their ranks, but I was determined to prove them wrong. From the very start, I threw myself into my work, poring over financial reports and analyzing market trends with a fervor that bordered on obsession. My unconventional approach to finance, which had served me so well in my earlier days, continued to yield impressive results. And soon, industry leaders began to take notice. The first time I was invited to speak at a major conference, I was terrified. What if I stumbled over my words? What if my ideas were met with ridicule? But as I took the stage, something strange happened. My fear gave way to a sense of calm, a sense of authority that I had never felt before. I spoke with conviction, with passion, and with a deep understanding of the subject matter. The audience was captivated, and soon the media was clamoring for my attention. Interviews, profiles, and feature stories, I was suddenly the toast of the financial world, the obese billionaire who was shaking things up on Wall Street. It was a surreal experience, to say the least. I had never sought to be the center of attention, but now I found myself at the eye of a media storm. And yet, despite the chaos, I remained focused on my work, driven by a fierce determination to prove myself, to show the world that I was more than just a novelty. I was a force to be reckoned with. But as my fame grew, so did the stakes. I began to sense that I was being watched, that every move I made was being scrutinized by unseen eyes. And then there were the whispers of a rival financier, someone who was determined to take me down, to prove that I was nothing more than a flash in the pan. I knew that I had to be careful, that I had to stay one step ahead of the game. The power of innovation and disrupting traditional norms had brought me to this point. But now, I had to confront the challenges of being a high-profile target on Wall Street. The question was I ready for the fight of my life? I still remember the feeling of being on top of the world. My investments were booming, and my name was on everyone's lips. I was the go-to person for stock market advice, and people were willing to pay top dollar for my expertise. But little did I know, my success had attracted a lot of envy and resentment. There were people who were waiting for me to slip up so they could take my place. It started with small things, a whispered rumor here, a subtle jab there, but I brushed it off as mere gossip. That was until I saw the news headline. Billionaire's luck runs out. Insiders question his investment strategies. My heart sank as I read the article. It was a scathing critique of my methods, and it was clear that someone had been feeding the press information. I knew exactly who was behind it. Alex, my former business partner, had been growing increasingly resentful of my success. He had always thought of himself as the smartest guy in the room, and my rise to fame had eclipsed him. I had tried to help him out, to bring him along on my deals, but he had grown more and more bitter. The article was just the beginning. Soon, investors were calling me, questioning my judgment. My phone was ringing off the hook, and I was starting to feel the pressure. That's when I realized that I had to act fast. I couldn't let Alex's betrayal bring me down. I gathered my team, and we came up with a plan. We would address the rumors head-on, show the world that my investments were solid, and that Alex's claims were baseless. It was a high-stakes showdown, but I was confident that I would come out on top. The tense boardroom was filled with investors, all of them looking for answers. Alex was there, a smug look on his face, but I wasn't intimidated. I stood up, looked him straight in the eye, and began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I know why you're here. You're wondering if the rumors are true, if I'm just a lucky beginner who got in over his head. But I'm here to tell you that those rumors are false. My investments are solid, and I have the numbers to prove it." I presented my case, showing them the data, the research, and the profits. I could see the doubt in their eyes begin to fade, replaced by a growing confidence. When I finished, the room was silent. Alex looked like he had been punched in the gut. And then something unexpected happened. A woman stood up, a woman I had never met before. "I believe in him," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I've seen his work, and I know he's the real deal." The room erupted into a chorus of agreement, and I knew that I had won. Alex slunk away, defeated, and I was left standing, my reputation intact. I had faced the challenge and come out on top. But as I left the boardroom, I knew that this was just the beginning. I had a new goal in sight, becoming a billionaire before the age of 30. It was ambitious, maybe even crazy, but I was ready for it. Bring it on, I thought to myself. Bring it on. I still remember the rush of adrenaline as I stepped into the high-stakes world of mergers and acquisitions. My reputation had been restored, and I was ready to take on the big players. I spent countless hours studying the market, analyzing trends, and building relationships with key players. And then, it happened, the opportunity of a lifetime. I was approached by two major companies looking to merge, and they wanted me to broker the deal. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to make it happen. I spent weeks negotiating, mediating, and problem-solving, and finally, the day arrived when the deal was signed. It was a record breaker, and my status as a Wall Street powerhouse was cemented. The news spread like wildfire, and my phone started ringing non-stop. Brokers, investors, and CEOs all wanted a piece of the action. I was hailed as the billionaire who moves Wall Street, and my name became synonymous with success. But I didn't rest on my laurels. I knew that the market was constantly evolving, and I needed to stay ahead of the curve. That's when I met a team of software developers who had a revolutionary idea, a cutting-edge trading platform that would change the game. I was intrigued and saw the potential for enormous growth. I invested in the tech startup and became a key player in the development of the platform. The office was a hub of activity, with coders working tirelessly to bring the vision to life. I spent hours with them, brainstorming, testing, and refining the platform. As we navigated the complex web of regulations and rival interests, I realized that this was more than just a business venture. It was a chance to revolutionize the industry. The intersection of finance and technology was the future, and I was at the forefront. But with success comes competition, and I knew that I had to stay ahead of the pack. The regulators were also watching, and I had to ensure that our platform was compliant with the ever-changing laws and regulations. I was ready for the challenge. I had come a long way from the days when I was ignored for my obesity in the stock market. Now I was the one calling the shots, and I was determined to stay on top. The question was, what would happen next? Would I be able to stay ahead of the competition and the regulators, or would I succumb to the pressure? Only time would tell. I still remember the day I received the phone call that changed everything. I was sitting in my luxurious mansion, surrounded by the finest things money could buy. But it was the words on the other end of the line that truly made me feel like I had made it. "Congratulations, you are now a billionaire," the voice said. I couldn't believe it. All the hard work, the long hours, the sacrifices I had made had finally paid off. As the news spread, I became an overnight sensation. The media couldn't get enough of me, and I was bombarded with interview requests and public appearances. I was hailed as a symbol of success, a rags-to-riches story that inspired millions. People looked up to me, and I felt a sense of pride and responsibility that I had never felt before. But with great power comes great scrutiny, and I soon found myself under the microscope. Every move I made was analyzed, every word I spoke was scrutinized. I couldn't even go out in public without being mobbed by fans and paparazzi. It was overwhelming, to say the least. One day, a journalist came to my mansion to interview me for a profile piece. She was young and ambitious, and I could tell she was determined to get the scoop of a lifetime. She asked me questions about my business, my personal life, my secrets to success. I tried to be as candid as possible, but I could sense that she was looking for something more, something that would make her story stand out. As the interview came to a close, she asked me about the weight of responsibility that came with being a billionaire. How did I handle the pressure? How did I stay grounded? I thought for a moment before answering. "It's a heavy burden to carry," I said, "but I try to remember where I came from, and I let that guide me in my decisions." She nodded, taking notes furiously. I could tell she was impressed, but I also knew that she was just doing her job. The real challenge was yet to come. As I looked out at the sprawling city below, I knew that I had a responsibility to use my platform for good. I had to give back to my community to leave a lasting legacy. But how? That was the question that kept me up at night, the question that I would have to answer in the days to come. I still remember the day I decided to turn my attention to philanthropy. It was a typical Monday morning on Wall Street, with the sound of suits rushing to grab a coffee before the market opened. But I wasn't thinking about the market that day. I was thinking about how I could use my platform to make a real difference in people's lives. I had always been passionate about education and financial literacy, and I knew that I wanted to do something to support these causes. So I decided to establish a foundation that would provide resources and opportunities to those who needed them most. It was a daunting task, but I was determined to make it happen. As I began to work on my foundation, I met an amazing team of community organizers who shared my passion for social justice and equality. They were tireless advocates for change, and they inspired me to be more outspoken about the issues that mattered to me. Together, we started to make a real impact in our community. One of the most rewarding experiences was working at a local community center. It was a vibrant hub of activity, with kids laughing and playing in the halls, and adults attending classes and workshops. I was struck by the sense of community and camaraderie that filled the air. It was a place where people from all walks of life came together to support each other. As I spent more time at the community center, I realized that there was a huge need for financial education and literacy programs. Many of the people I met were struggling to make ends meet, and they didn't have access to the resources they needed to improve their financial situation. So, I made it my mission to provide them with the tools and knowledge they needed to succeed. But my philanthropic efforts didn't stop there. I also became an outspoken advocate for social justice and equality. I used my platform to speak out against systemic injustices and to promote diversity and inclusion. It wasn't always easy, and I faced plenty of criticism and backlash along the way. But I knew that it was worth it. One of my proudest achievements was launching a passion project to empower underrepresented groups on Wall Street. It was a challenging endeavor, but I was determined to make a difference. I worked tirelessly to create opportunities and provide resources to those who needed them most. And slowly but surely, I started to see real change happening. People from all backgrounds were starting to break into the industry, and they were thriving. It was an incredible feeling to know that I had played a small part in their success. As I looked out at the changing landscape of Wall Street, I knew that my philanthropic efforts were just beginning. There was still so much work to be done, but I was excited for the challenge ahead. Little did I know that my greatest challenge was yet to come, balancing my business and personal life. As my philanthropic efforts gained momentum, I found myself being pulled in multiple directions. I was torn between my commitment to my foundation and my duties as a CEO. It was a delicate balancing act, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for the challenge. But I was determined to find a way to make it work. After all, I had come too far to let anything get in the way of my mission to make a difference. I'll never forget the day I closed a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars, only to come home to an empty house. My family was out and the silence was deafening. I sat down on the couch, surrounded by the opulent decorations and sleek furniture, and felt a hollow pang in my chest. This was the life I had worked so hard for, but at what cost? As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I found it increasingly difficult to balance my work and family life. The demands of being a billionaire were relentless. The phone calls, the meetings, the endless scrutiny. I would often come home late at night, exhausted, only to find my loved ones already in bed. We would exchange brief words, but the connection was gone. We were living separate lives under the same roof. The constant pressure took a toll on my mental health. I would wake up in the middle of the night, my mind racing with worries about the market, about the deals, about the image I had to maintain. I felt like I was living in a fishbowl, with the whole world watching my every move. The stress was suffocating, and I began to withdraw from my loved ones, unable to cope with the weight of my responsibilities. I remember one evening I was sitting in my study, staring blankly at a family photo. My loved one came in and sat down beside me, taking my hand in theirs. "We never see you anymore," they said, their voice barely above a whisper. "You're always gone, always working. We feel like we're losing you." I looked at them, and for a moment I saw the pain and the sadness in their eyes. I knew I had to make a change, but I didn't know how. The harsh realities of fame and wealth were beginning to sink in. I had thought that success would bring me happiness, but it had only brought me isolation. I was a billionaire, but I was losing the things that truly mattered: my relationships, my health, my sense of self. As I sat there, surrounded by the trappings of my success, I realized that I had to reevaluate my priorities. I had to find a way to balance my work and my personal life before it was too late. But little did I know, life had other plans. A shocking wake-up call was just around the corner, one that would remind me that nothing lasts forever, and that the personal costs of my success were only just beginning to unfold. I still remember the day the market correction hit like a ton of bricks. I had been on top of the world, my investments were booming, and my wealth was skyrocketing. But in an instant, everything changed. The numbers on my screen began to plummet, and I felt like I was watching my entire empire crumble before my eyes. I sat in stunned silence, my mind racing as I tried to process the sheer scale of the disaster unfolding before me. A significant portion of my wealth gone. The thought sent a cold shiver down my spine. I had always known that the stock market was a high-risk game, but I had never imagined that I would be the one to fall so far so fast. As the news sank in, I knew I had to act fast. I called an emergency meeting with my team, and we gathered in a somber boardroom, the tension palpable. My rival financier, who had always been a thorn in my side, was there too, a smug look on his face. I could tell he was enjoying my downfall, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me defeated. The meeting was a blur of frantic discussions and desperate attempts to mitigate the damage. But as the hours ticked by, it became clear that the situation was more dire than I had initially thought. I had to face the fact that I had lost a significant portion of my wealth, and with it, my reputation as the billionaire who moved Wall Street. As the days that followed turned into weeks, I found myself withdrawing from the world. I stopped taking calls, stopped attending meetings, and stopped leaving my house. I was in a state of shock, unable to come to terms with what had happened. But as the silence and solitude began to suffocate me, I knew I had to snap out of it. I had to take a long, hard look at myself and figure out what had gone wrong. I spent hours in introspection, replaying every decision I had made, every risk I had taken. And slowly but surely I began to see the truth. I had let my ego get the better of me. I had become arrogant and complacent, thinking that I was invincible. But the market had taught me a valuable lesson. Success is fleeting, and humility is essential. As I emerged from my period of self-reflection, I knew that I had a choice to make. I could let this setback define me, or I could use it as a wake-up call. I could learn from my mistakes and come back stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. And that's exactly what I did. I set my sights on a new challenge, securing my legacy and passing on my knowledge to the next generation. The question was, would I be able to succeed? Only time would tell. I stood in front of the packed auditorium, clutching my newly published memoir. The crowd's applause was deafening as I took my place at the podium, scanning the sea of expectant faces. My journey, once marked by shame and self-doubt, had become a beacon of hope for countless others. The words I had penned on those pages were more than just a story. They were a testament to the power of perseverance and determination. As I began to speak, my mind flashed back to the early days when the doubts of others had threatened to consume me. But I had persevered, fueled by an unyielding passion for the stock market. And now I was being hailed as a trailblazer, a pioneer who had shattered the glass ceiling of Wall Street. The irony was not lost on me. The very same people who had once dismissed me because of my obesity were now clamoring to hear my story. But this moment was not just about me. It was about the countless lives I had touched along the way, the young entrepreneurs I had mentored, the businesses I had helped launch, and the boundaries I had pushed. As I spoke, I felt a sense of pride and purpose wash over me. This was my legacy, not just a string of successful trades or a bank account overflowing with zeros, but a movement. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity, as I embarked on a nationwide tour to promote my book. But even as I basked in the spotlight, my mind was already turning to the next chapter. I had always known that I wanted to leave a lasting impact on the world of finance, to shape the next generation of entrepreneurs. And so, I set my sights on establishing a business school, a place where talented young minds could come to learn, grow, and flourish. The campus was a haven of innovation and creativity, a space where ideas could take root and flourish. I spent hours walking the halls, listening to lectures and mentoring students. There was one young protege in particular who caught my eye, a bright, ambitious kid with a fire in their belly and a passion for finance that rivaled my own. As the months passed, I watched with pride as the school began to take shape. We attracted top-tier faculty, expanded our curriculum to include innovative courses, and built a network of alumni who would go on to change the world. And then, the final piece fell into place. I was inducted into the Wall Street Hall of Fame, a testament to the power of my legacy. As I stood on that stage, surrounded by the titans of finance, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. This was the culmination of a lifetime's work, the moment when I could look back and say, I did it. But even as I celebrated, I knew that this was not the end. My legacy would live on, a testament to the power of perseverance and determination. I had moved Wall Street, but more importantly, I had moved the world.